And I said, I don't really have a strategy. Or I guess my strategy was that I keep doing what I did before, and just because I'd owned the home with my parents, I found that we're just getting ahead, and I could pay off my own home eventually, and that was it.
This is Property Investory, where we talk to successful property investors, find out more about their stories, mindset and strategy. I'm Taran Shum, and in this episode on Property Investory, we continue the conversation with real estate agent Walter Nanni, who has devised a clever strategy for purchasing properties as investments. Discover why flipping properties aren't his cup of tea, and how placing all his eggs in one basket has actually paid off for him in the long term. Nanni says mindset is one of the most important aspects to consider before starting out in the property investing game. According to him, what holds many people back from initially investing in property is the uncertainty and fear that comes with not knowing what to do.
I find that with my clients as well, that there's a feeling that you've got to do something, but just not knowing what it is that you've got to do. And that in itself, I guess, there's fear involved, and there's all different things that happen. And a lot of people, you understand that everyone's a real estate expert or advisor, in life. And the more barbecues I attend now, people will ask me because they know who I am, and they'll sort of go, "Hey, what do you think this year, or what should I do, or whatever else?" And there's always, I start telling them what I think, and then there's always someone that will jump in and start to sort of give more advice, and the people around me who know who I am or whatever else might, they'll always have a laugh with me and sort of go or at me and say, everyone's a real estate expert.
What helped to condition his own mindset was to surround himself with brilliant mentors with entrepreneurial ways of thinking.
One of the biggest parts of, I guess, what I've done, and I guess what really kicked me off was having great mentors around me, and those mentors have amazing portfolios. They're very smart guys who basically, I guess, worked it out. And one of them always says, life is all about, you get hit with a challenge and you just got to work it out. And one of those is financial stability, and a lot of people don't work it out. So the word entrepreneur gets thrown around these days. Like, I watch, my wife watches a bit of reality TV where everyone's, when they join, like on The Bachelor or something, they're an entrepreneur, but when they get asked, what is it that they're entrepreneurial about? Oh, it's just that it's who I am. Okay, but what have you done? And I think the biggest for me, an entrepreneur is someone who's actually, worked it out as far as financially, and said, well, I worked out how to make money without my time. In other words, my money makes me money, and that's the point.
Yeah, and to be able to generate passive income from that as well too.
Absolutely. When that penny drops, and you finally realise that in life you're either going to be a slave to your job, which also makes it that you don't enjoy your job as much, because if you're a slave to it, you've got to get up every day and you have to show up. Then you soon realise that, hey, it's better to do something that I really love if I don't really have to. And that becomes really cool. So if you can work that out and realise that it's either you getting up every day and making a lot of money, or what's your money actually doing? Because a lot of people are sitting on, especially in Sydney after the boom, sitting on a lot of equity. And when I show up and I meet, my potential clients who are all in their 40s and 50s in that regard, and they're sitting on a lot of equity, $1 million, $2 million worth of equity, their money sits at home every day whilst they get up every morning and go to work, and they don't do anything about it. And I say, well, why don't we get that money to start working for you? And that's the big shift.
Nanni's mentor, business partner and friend from Hardcourts had a great impact on how he developed his property portfolio, which provided him with a plan that he continues to live by today.
So I was working with a business partner at the time in Hardcourts that I actually brought over to Hardcourts because he's been a mentor of mine for more than 20 years and a good friend. And he owns a very large portfolio. And he asked me the question, 7 or 8 years ago, saying, "What's your strategy with owning these investment properties that you've got?" And I said, I don't really have a strategy, or I guess my strategy was that I keep doing what I did before, and just because I'd owned the home with my parents, I found that we're just getting ahead, and I could pay off my own home eventually, and that was it for as far as a strategy. I just wanted to pay off my own home. And he said, "That's good. That's better than most, but it's still not. You could do a whole lot more. I mean, you're a young man, you haven't reached 40 yet, and you could do bigger goals." And I thought, yeah, cool. So he asked me the question, and he said, "So how much money do you need to live on each year if you didn't have to pay your rent or a mortgage?" And first I thought, what the hell is he talking about? I have no idea. I mean, we earn what we earn, but I don't know. He said, "Well, can you survive, or are you happy to be earning $100,000 a year if you didn't have to pay rent or a mortgage?" And I said, "Yeah, oh hell, that's awesome, because if I didn't have those expenses, then I could still travel overseas each year, have dinners out, obviously run your household, pay electricity and all the bills and food, and be happy days because I have a lot of spare time." And he said, "Well, all right, let's work on $100,000. He said, "How many properties do you need to own in order for you to have $100,000 worth of income?" And again, I thought, I have no idea. So we started working out of my properties what they're roughly bringing in per annum, and the answer was $25,000 each. So very quick mathematics. We went, well, if I had 4 of those, that would give me $100,000 worth of income per annum. And he said, "Yep, cool." And then he said, "Well, how many properties would you need to buy in order to own 4 outright?" And, or sorry, 5, because you've got to have 1 to live in. And I said, "Well, I don't know. Is this a trick question?" He said, "No, it's not. But you've got to understand that," he said, "look, you've been around now for, back then it was probably 15, 16 years in the business." And he said, "You've seen two boom periods, 2 cycles of a cyclical marketplace. In other words, something that repeats every 7 to 10 years." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, every time it goes through 7 to 10 years, it doubles in price. So how many properties do you want to own in order to own 5 outright?" And I said, "I have no idea." He said, "Look, usually double it. So if you want to own 5 properties outright, you want to be buying 10. So that basically when you go through 1 or 2 cycles, so in other words, 10 or 20 years, then you can sell off half and pay off the other half." And that became my plan for the next, still living it, I guess, but my plan for the future. And I owned 3 at the time. Then we bought a block of 4 because I wanted to accelerate it. And since then, we bought another block of units and another 2 properties. So we're sitting at about 12 at the moment, and we're looking to develop both blocks. So that'll end up with probably over, well, not probably, but over 25 properties. And the hardest ones to buy were the first, second, and third.
The property investing strategies which Nanni implements himself don't differ much from those that he devises for his clients. In basic terms, he says it's about buying and holding properties over a long term as the capital growth increases, which in turn generates cash flow.
Look, it's typically the same. It's just, I guess what changes is, depending on what they have and what their past experiences have been, and also what areas they're looking to invest in. Because even though I'll say to them, "I think you should invest here," hey, they've got to feel comfortable, and I can only advise or suggest. It's really their journey, not mine. But I know that probably 80% of the time they'll follow me and say, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's go with that." The strategy doesn't change that much. I mean, I think you can read a lot of books on the subject, and I have, and generally speaking, it's all about being able to build a portfolio where you've got positive geared property sitting in it. In other words, not costing you money. Generally speaking, they're all interest only. And the biggest mental shift to get around your mind is that you're not actually in the business of paying off 10 homes. You're in the business of holding those homes, and what's making you money is the boom periods. And look, the reality is that yes, you can wait. You can do it, and there's 2 key things I think that have worked for me. Besides that strategy, is that I fabricate my own equity by renovating.
Mm-hmm.
So that that makes it so that I get more return on each property, and also it values up to buy the next one. And so once I've got something that's positive geared, I've also got a lot of equity in it, so I can then use that to keep going. So hence the hardest ones to buy are the first, second, and third, but after that, the rest become pretty easy. But we maintain a pretty high goals, like we said in the last episode, and a routine of each year we renovate 2 or 3. We do, we reinvest in it, I guess, and we're constantly adding more value so that everything values up and moves on to the next one.
Other popular strategies for property investing, such as flipping and buying lots of positive cash flow properties, aren't high priority for him as they involve high risks.
I've heard other strategies out there, and some of them is to flip. But the problem with flipping property is that I believe you lose a lot of money in fees and costs and things, and taxes. So I find that you're better off keeping that equity in that home and using it for the next one. The other part of that is that, or the other strategy that I've heard that kind of, it's been around for a while, but there's different people that have come along and revived it, I guess, is that instead of owning, 10 properties and selling down half and paying off half, they end up owning 30, 40 or 50 properties. And what they're living off is just they buy them only when they're positive geared, and they buy them so that they're the money they're making is like, $100 or $200 off each property each month. But if you've got 30 of them, then obviously you've replaced your income. The downside of that is that it's not for me, so I don't tend to advise it because I find that it's higher risk, and I find that, you just don't have the equity that I've got. Like we're on 50% equity, 50% loans. We've still got, $6.5 million out there, but we can cash in 3.5.
Definitely.
Or 3. Yeah, so that's the difference, and that's what I guess lets me sleep at night. That's the point. It only takes one storm to come through, and then you end up in a lot of trouble. And I know that there's a couple out there at the moment that are saying, no, it's all great, but they've only lived through one boom, and there's a storm always coming, and that's what you've got to outlive. Any captain can steer a ship in perfect weather. That's the thing. So I think having equity and having positive geared around you, you really, I say you can't go wrong, but you've got less chance of going wrong, and you can always sell one to get yourself out of trouble if you had to.
Coming up after the break, we'll delve further into Nanni's strategy when looking to purchase properties in Sydney.
So in other words, we make them around $50,000 a purchase by buying undervalued. But look, we still manage to do it. They still exist.
Some of the personal habits which have contributed to his success
is that I'll sit whilst we're watching a bit of TV, but I'll actually sit and break down, and I'll reanalyze the yearly goals, and I'll break down to see what has to happen this week. So I find that a lot of people are more reactive to life and the world as opposed to proactive. And whereas I like to be, I've run a business for a long time, so you have to be thinking about where you want to take that business, I guess.
And that's next. I'm Tyron Shum, and you're listening to Property Investory. With the Sydney market becoming increasingly difficult to invest in, Nanni says as an agent, he's able to impart knowledge to clients who are currently looking to purchase.
The toughest time was a year and a half ago when the market got really tough for about a quarter. And that was the hardest time because we typically bring, we cover our wage, what we charge, and we usually double or treble it. So in other words, we make them around $50,000 a purchase by buying undervalued. But look, we still managed to do it. They still exist. We just bought one in December where it was a 2-bedroom unit in Bondi. We paid just over $1 million, $1,011. It got valued, or the value came through and said it was worth 115. So we made $150,000 for them. They're currently going through a renovation where it'll be worth even more than that. So the properties do exist. How we do it, look, we're doing it every day. So our relationships with the agents are, second to none because they've known me for such a long time. I've known them. I've been a real estate agent for 20 years, so I even, help them along the way to create deals and advise them and teach them and do different things. But the reality is that, I mean, we've got a great working relationship. So whenever they've got something, they'll share it with me and say, hey, look, I need to sell this for $1 million or 950, for example. You got to buy? And I'll say, yeah, absolutely. And we do a deal. And out of every 10 deals that I see at the moment, there are 2 or 3 that are undervalued. The rest of them are either, so 5 of those are on market and 2 or 3 are overpriced. So that's kind of the current scenario. When the market changes and it becomes, when it got really tight, it was only 1 deal out of the 10 that became undervalued. That was very tough. But typically it floats around those sort of numbers, and then if it becomes on the opposite, which Bondi rarely becomes a buyer's market, but if it did, it'd kind of be more balanced. So it might be 5 of them are undervalued and 5 aren't, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there are undervalued properties all the time. Not forgetting that the reason why people struggle to buy those, I guess, without us is that the second part of that is that you've got to actually recognise an undervalued property when you see it. And I see a lot of buyers that are my competitors. They show up and they hesitate because they don't know the market. They don't know what value when they see it. So whereas I do, and I know that's something that I can get a good deal there, and I jump on it.
Having learned that Sydney and Melbourne has the most population growth each year, personally, he has no plans to invest interstate.
Look, being in real estate for such a long time, I've heard all the horror stories of, a lot of people have moved or bought property in Queensland for a very long time. And when I say horror stories, they're not horror, but I mean, only a few horror stories. The rest of them just always decided to come back. So I'd always go to Queensland and always buy there, and then 2 years later they're back and made very little money. So that's been with me for a long time. So I never really had any faith in buying interstate. I do believe in Melbourne because I've heard good stories from Melbourne different times, but I've also heard some bad stories. I guess what I learned since then, because I started investigating a bit more about interstate, because as I speak at a lot of expos and conferences, I hear other speakers speak about how they should buy in Melbourne and Brisbane and all that. And when experts sort of wrote it off last year, they were all saying go to Brisbane. But I started thinking a bit harder about that and reading some more articles about it. And what it made me realise is that Sydney and Melbourne have the most population growth each year, led by Sydney but followed closely by Melbourne. And as far as what creates a marketplace for an investor or anyone is supply and demand. And the problem with, I think, particularly Brisbane and the West Coast as well, so, Perth and Adelaide and so forth, is that they lack the population growth. And so without population growth, you don't have demand. And the problem then is that if you've got a mining boom, say in Perth, where it's led by the mining boom that ended and which was always going to end, then it means that you've got an oversupply. And that's what I'm seeing, particularly in Brisbane and now in Melbourne, that there's just an oversupply. They're just building high-rise left, right and centre. Even though they've got the infrastructure, the population growth doesn't keep up with the demand. The
supply. Yeah.
The supply. I'm sorry. And so that's the problem. And this is the problem that Sydney will face this year, I think, as well. That it always happens at the tail end of the boom. What finishes the boom is an oversupply, and that's what you're about to see in Sydney as well. But it hasn't been that case just because of population growth and the Chinese buying in Sydney has been so that the demand has been far outweighing the supply.
Yeah.
And that's why I haven't and I don't see myself ever leaving Sydney.
While it may seem wise to place all his eggs in one basket, keeping his investments in Sydney has worked out for him and many other investors.
Funny enough, it's not deterred a lot of people. In fact, it motivates them more to come into it. So, I mean, affordability till recently was there still, around 4.5%. So it's still been fairly affordable because our wages obviously kept up with demand. Having said that, you look at Sydney, and I guess it's hard to just talk about Sydney because Sydney is broken up into 3 or 4 different marketplaces. And so whenever you hear reports of Sydney, you got to think, well, hang on, what's driving that? So you've got the east, you've got the blue ribbon areas of the North Shore and that, and then you've got the other tiers that are working alongside, and then you've got the west. So there's a lot of different marketplaces happening in different demographics. The other thing to think of is, as far as putting all eggs in one basket, is that I've got investors, particularly one guy that owns 35, 40 one-bedroom units around Darlinghurst and Potts Point. And a lot of people have said to him over the last 30, 40 years, why don't you diversify? But this has kind of worked out for him, So,
yes.
yeah.
Exceptionally around that area.
Exceptionally well, yeah. And one of my other business partners owns a lot of blocks of units in Sydney, all over Sydney, and that worked out for him as well. So, I guess I have living examples of proof of guys that have done it before, and that's where I'm getting my life lessons as well.
Nanni attributes several personal habits to his success, including regularly setting goals and reaffirming them each week. However, he also says that having a partner who is on the same wavelength as you, both as an investor and in life, is crucial.
I can be a bit of a perfectionist, so good or bad, I don't know. But I guess my personality style, but also I guess my anxieties in life, are all about. Look, I'm competitive, but I like to get it right. And I guess as a habit, I like to know that I'm in a safe place. In other words, safety or security is a big thing in part of my world. So the habits that I run around my daily or weekly or monthly is, I guess, what we talked about before, which is setting a goal each year for the whole year and then breaking it down per month or per quarter and per month and then per week. So I run a pretty tight ship, and we're busy people, both wife and I, and we just we get through the weeks. So every Sunday night, the habit that I have is that I'll sit whilst we're watching a bit of TV, but I'll actually sit and break down, and I'll reanalyze the yearly goals, and I'll break down to see what has to happen this week. So I find that a lot of people are more reactive to life and the world as opposed to proactive. And whereas I like to be, I've run a business for a long time, so you have to be thinking about where you want to take that business, I guess. Tell you what I mean, part of this is also having a partner alongside that is your actual partner, your best friend, but also that comes along for the journey, because that's where I see a lot of clients struggle with that, because one of the two will be motivated to invest and to get ahead in life, and if the other one's not, it can be a huge challenge. So part of that is making sure that your goals all happen together and you're aiming the same way, because that can be, a make or break deal, basically.
When it comes to books on property investing, the principles from popular titles such as Rich Dad, Poor Dad have continued to impact Nanni over many years.
I know that probably two of the ones that really changed or got me on the right thinking was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I know everyone talks about, but it's such a good book for its time that, the principles are still there. I used to actually get up and speak about that book. That's how I first got started speaking, about investing, because I thought, this makes sense, like it's all about money makes money, and either that or you're making it yourself. And I had a similar experience where, we're blue. We migrated to Australia when I was 8 years old, and my family came out. And for me, my dad's a blue collar worker, so a tradie. So in the end, my rich dad was more my first business partner, who was my mentor as well, and that's how I learned how to invest in real estate. So I could really relate to that book, and I still can. And then there's The Richest Man in Babylon was probably another one that also helped me recognize that if you've got to pay yourself first, and the moral of that book is that basically, you've got to invest and put money aside so that money again makes money, same principle, and it just accumulates. And if you don't do that, then you're doing yourself an injustice. So once you get your head around things like that, they can change your perception, and it's part of the journey. And I think, especially if you're starting out and want to get your hands on a good book, I think that'd be great. And look, I haven't read them in a long time, so even when you ask me, I've got to think back, right? But it's funny how they stick in your mind. You can quickly just go, oh, hang on a minute. But the principles are in your head, basically. That's the point.
If you'd like to connect with Walter Nanni and learn more about how you can apply his strategy, you can do so via
work with I guess the biggest agents or buyers agents in Australia called Cohen Handler. So they can look me up on that website, cohenhandler.com.au, or on my mobile phone. Am I allowed to give my mobile phone? Or
It's up to you. It's up to you.
Yeah. Everyone's got it these days. So yeah, it doesn't stop. 0411 879 434. So most people do that or drop me a line. Either I have a Facebook page called Walter Nanni, Sydney's top buyers agent, which everyone still gives me slack about, but and then on LinkedIn. So either one of the forms is fine, and then I'll come back to you and if we can help you with a strategy to invest. Then that's the deal.
Thank you to Walter Nanni, our guest on this episode of Property Investory. If you want to hear more about his journey, then visit our website at propertyinvestory.com. Simply type in the search bar Walter Nanni and select that episode to learn more about his story.